Greetings and welcome. How you been?
Doing good. Still dealing with health issues, but I'm working on them and involved in a few things. But I'm doing okay.
And your summer so far? This the last month of the yes of August, the
Yeah,
last month of the summer. Yes.
boy, it's passing by fast. Looks like the days pass by fast, but I'm trying to stay cool. That's for sure. This heat is something else.
Yeah, 100%. But today we're going to talk about some issues which are indeed important. We're going to talk about the U.S. Iranian war and Trump and the Republican Party, the Democrats, and what's going on with them, and talk about some state and local politics. And also, we're going to look at Nolan Wells case and wildfires, and look at the Trump Justice Department and with Piro and the confirmation of Blanche and those kind of things. And see, we're going to cover an array of things over this 30 minutes. But let's start first with the Trump administration, and in particular with the Iranian war. I think maybe I've lost count. Pieces at hand, pieces at hand. It almost remind us of from the 1960s when Richard Nixon was in power, and in the 70s we had pieces at hand, pieces at hand. What's going on? What are your thoughts? Yes, sir.
Well, it's what I call strapping onto the roller coaster. You know, we're talking about we have an agreement, tentative agreement coming out, and the next thing we know, we're back to war, peace agreement again, and war. So, I've grown accustomed to the unpredictability of this whole Iran-U.S. War. I think you have to look at the underlying motives of it, and in my opinion, it has more to do with money, oil, and the dominance of the oil industry. So, I see that, and the president came out and finally admitted, which we all knew, that the oil companies are getting rich off this
Richer,
situation,
yes, yes, indeed.
richer and richer on this, and while the public is suffering.
And there's an undertone there that many in America discuss and believe that this particular administration, that this president himself is being rewarded through war. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, both in terms of the people that are part of his, who underwrite his political campaign, and as well as those that are his friends and families who also benefit from it.
Well, I want to ask two questions. Well, one question in particular, but that reflects both sides. Advantages with the war. Who do you see advantage? Where is the advantage now with the Iranians or with the United States? And do you see as the disadvantage for this war to continue? Yes.
Well, if that in terms of the advantage as it relates to money making,
Yes, sir.
it's definitely those in the United States who stand to benefit from the oil. But if you look at it in terms of the strategies of the two countries, we see that for the United States, it's really trying to con- dictate basically the Strait of Hormuz and the traffic coming through there, taking control of that, and to force concessions on the part of Iran. Uh, I'm not so much with the nuclear piece because, as far as I'm concerned, getting them to say they're not going to do nuclear uh, weapons is absurd. But the Strait of Hormuz has an impact on the global economy, and that's the major advantage of the Iranians. On this side, the advantage is on the fact that it closes down the oil supply on coming out of that particular going through the Strait of Hormuz, and it puts our oil production capabilities more into the spotlight. And so it we actually benefit from the closing of the Straits of Hormuz. That's our advantage. Uh, Geopolitically, I'm not really sure. their advantages and disadvantages. But the weapons, of course, and the idea that the Trump administration wants to have another trillion or so on weapons that are being depleted. So there are advantages and disadvantages on both sides.
Long term, short term. Do you? And before we move to another conversation, and I happen to believe that this administration may have bitten off more than it can chew, and in particular, that the Iranians have dealt with American presidents before, and the Iranians understand. They have experts, PhDs, individuals who are experts in American society, who observe America, who study America, who understand Western civilization, understand Westerners. They know that their cycle, the American cycle, is very, very short. And they believe that they can hold out a little bit longer in terms of the culture, the people, and even materially. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely correct. And politically, it does not work in the favor of the Trump administration. The longer he's in this war, remember, this war was supposed to end in a few weeks, and now, and then even the approach of bombing Iran to oblivion
Yes.
does not win us the favor of nations around the world. So I think
The verbose language you think may be a bit too much?
I think it's
But this president says that is the only language they understand.
well. This president, I would reverse that and say that is the only language the president understands. You remember, this is the president that went from the Department of Defense to the Department of War. Diplomacy is out. We don't even know what's happening with respect to diplomacy. They come up with an agreement. Iran says one thing. The United States says another thing. It is just really hard to figure out what's going on. But at this point, clearly, Iran has advantages that the country is not willing to stay in this for a long time.
Well, let's move into another conversation with respect to war, and this is more in a domestic platform. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party, in particular, the Democrats now are working hard to get, and they're looking at elections in Massachusetts. They're looking at elections in Missouri, and you're looking at the war that exists between the conflict that exists between these democratic socialists and mainstream Democrats, and yet you go to the other side of the equation and you look at the war that exists with Republicans and the Tea faction, the conservative, the MAGA faction versus the traditional Republicans. And we find now that this war that's taking place with the Democratic Party. And I want you to give us your professional assessment after looking at the elections last night, and looking at the elections in the Democratic venues last night, and looking at the advances that socialists have made, democratic socialists have made, and will those advantages go from Democratic primaries? And do you believe in November they're going to carry over to the general election and prove to be successful for Democrats? Yes, sir.
Well, I think when you look at the overall
All right.
picture of the House districts and the Senate districts that are up, the number of Democratic socialists are not that significant relative to all of the seats that are there. But there are key districts, both Senate districts and House districts, that are being highlighted because it pits the traditional establishment Democrats against the quote unquote Democratic Socialists. And this is nothing new. This was the same replay that we saw with Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And at the end, it worked out for Joe Biden because he was able to incorporate some of the platform of Bernie Sanders. They came together for a national victory. I think the same thing should happen with this with the districts, the House and Senate districts, because the Republican Party has its divisions as well. I mean, we saw John Cornyn and to actually push back on the anti-weaponization fund of the president. We saw that to get a concession, Blanche had to concede that he would drop the anti-weaponization fund, and so and you saw a division within the president's cabinet with Janine Pirro coming out and stating the facts of the pool, the
Yeah.
reflecting pool, but it's a bad look for Trump because it's the person he picked, and then also it's not what the facts say, is you do what I say, and I don't think it's a good look. So in terms of Trump's popularity, in terms of the implications for the midterm, and then of course you have a number of scandals in races across the country with Republicans and a few Democrats. So those are going to be key things. But in terms of the overall, for the districts that do have Democratic Socialists and traditional Democrats, I think they're going to come together in November. But by and large, when I look at the number of races they're being highlighted by the media, but it's far and few between. And some have won, some have lost. Not all. Of course, the biggest one was in Michigan with the Senate race, but Cori Bush, who was also part of the Democratic Socialists, and a couple others lost, and a few others won. So I think it's kind of overstated. It's to the advantage of the Republican Party to say that socialist, communist, but it has an effect in attracting more young people and more people to vote Democratic.
Yeah, I see that. Now, we find, and I like the fact that you mentioned that particular demographic. What do you account for the fact that traditional, older, should I say older African Americans tend to fall more in line with the traditional aspects, the traditional platform of the Democratic Party, whereas the younger African American community, those under 30, tend to fall in line and tend to favor to a large extent this socialist agenda. And what do you account for that? And you're an individual who spent much of your professional life working with young professionals and young African Americans. Yes, sir, at the university.
Well, I mean, it's the reality of the affordability issues that people are facing under this administration, whether it's for insurance or it's for groceries, whether it's for home ownership. I mean, those are real, and they're not just real. The biggest challenge is for young people, but I would venture to say that the positive side of it is the attraction of young people. But I think that because of these affordability issues, that it's also attracting independents. It's also attracting some Republicans, and it's definitely even traditional Democrats are considering the Democratic Socialists.
Yeah, and is this not setting the election table up that in the general election that Republicans can say, okay, this person's a communist or a socialist, not even knowing the difference? Is the Democratic Party setting themselves up for those sort of candidates?
Well, I think
In the general.
at the end of the day, it's the issues that account. And if you look at the Democratic Socialists, they're on the side of using more governmental money to help those that are suffering. That's a positive issue for both the poor and the middle class who are suffering under this administration. They also are promoting more of a balance as it relates to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And that may work to some extent, even though they would, the Israeli lobby would be in that play. They're also, which is very unpopular, is with ICE. So I think those issues that the Democratic Socialists, I mean, if you get caught up on the word Democratic Socialist, that's one thing. But if you get caught up, what has come back that Bernie Sanders talked about, which is a winning issue for many people, Medicare for all. Now that's not a so this idea of Democratic Socialist, it's really name calling and labeling, and I'm not really sure in this era, communist and socialist has the same kind of implication that it did in previous eras.
Yes, so turning the conversation again, Nolan Wells. Something that all of us in the African American community are paying particular attention to, and to a case where this young man went off with some friends, and friends came back. He did not. Enjoyed themselves, swimming, and all those other good things. And the impact of this particular case, more than case, the impact of this particular situation in the public arena. Yes, sir.
We've seen this before. Now we've seen it with Alton Sterling, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Blair, over and over again. This idea of Black Lives Matters emerged. Trayvon Martin about the lack of justice for the murder of young black men and young black women. So we've seen this picture. The difference here is that we see this young man was not involved in any conflict with the police or with law enforcement, but seemed to be with a social group that some way or another he got murdered, or I would say murdered, or he came up dead. The difference, this is similar to what we've seen in the Jim Crow era when, To Kill a Mockingbird, the jury, the DA, the coroner, all of those lined up in support of protecting whoever was in the people responsible for this happening, and it's almost like a cover-up, if you ask me. But the difference is, and the positive that I see about it, as a result, we see an outcry in a unity among the black community, from the grassroots to celebrities to entertainment, that the monies that have been drawn. But I don't think it's going to go away. I believe ultimately someone will be held accountable for his death. But as far as the way Ocean Springs and Mississippi is behaving, it's no different than what we saw in the Jim Crow era.
In the Jim Crow area, it's part of the
typical.
Southern, yes.
But it's a little different because the network of black political, economic, social, cultural entities has come about and say, we going to have accountability.
And it's instantaneous.
Instantaneous.
Yeah,
that's right.
And the wildfires, I know that's an area of concern for you and all of us, actually, the fires which are taking place. And I'm interested in your political analysis in terms of the wildfires which are taking place, and the response to it from a political position.
Well,
it's with FEMA and the gutting of FEMA. Yes.
Well, it's Washington and Oregon today. Tomorrow it could be anyone. It goes back to how the idea of global warming and climate change has gotten lost. And in this administration, we have an administration that has gotten rid of all of the air quality, water, environmental stuff. They're firing people with, who's concerned about public health. They're firing people who are concerned about the environment. So that has the potential of reemerging as more, and it's also happening. We see in Europe. We see it's happening in Canada. So I predict that it's going to reemerge because this president is saying, look, drill, baby, drill. We don't need the consequences. We have to, the campaigns have to be, and some of the Democratic Socialists are speaking to the lack of climate change, global warming, the uncertain weather conditions. But we see it daily, and I think it's going to reemerge.
Yeah, and you're right. This president has also have said that with the bad air and the smog and all that's taking place in the north in Michigan and in Washington D.C. and the part of the north, the eastern corridor, it, he blames Canada and says Canada should be held responsible.
Well, Canada's not responsible for what's happening in Washington and Oregon or what's
Yeah.
happening on, it's really unpredictable uncertainty in weather patterns. And the science has correlated that with, uh, you know, messing with the ozone and messing with the things that are supposed to protect us. And so I think we're going to have to go back to that to some extent.
It's amazing because all of that came under the Nixon administration, protecting the air,
Absolutely.
doing that sort of thing. And that was part
Absolutely.
of what his administration, a then conservative Republican, said, "Hey, you got to pay particular attention to the environmental laws,
Right.
and to the environment that we live in." Also, with respect to the reflecting pool, I know that it's amazing that now that the president wants someone to be held accountable for a mistake that happened under his administration, but there's someone that it seems to be an abstraction out there, and looks like that this woman is perhaps may very well lose her job.
I'm
Yes,
shocked because
yes.
if you know her on Fox News,
Oh,
she's not mealy mouth. She doesn't know, but it's amazing how these people, once they get under the Trump administration, she's not saying a mumbling word. I mean, this is totally goes against her character.
but again, and they're saying that the Justice Department may let her go, and the Justice Department they've lost over 1,000 some odd people,
That tells you
qualified individuals who have been
Absolutely.
terminated, who have resigned or left, and so
It's the same thing that's
yes,
happening with Kennedy and the public health piece. We have more every day. We're discovering, new viruses that are coming. New that that threat to the public health is directly related to the philosophy of this Trump administration and his supporters.
now you're a political science professor, and you observe this, and we look at the confirmation process, and you're looking at Blanche and what's taking place. What do you make of this confirmation process? Because I have my thoughts on it, but what do you make of the confirmation process and the two senators that held out because they wanted written guarantees?
Yeah, well, they
Yeah,
not
so
only held out because of written guarantees, they held out because Trump screwed them in the primary. They're not. This is their last swan song. But also, there's some legitimacy, and they've really helped to me the Republican Party. He wouldn't pass the affordable health bill. This one was another killer where you're going to set up an anti-weaponization fund for the people who invaded the Capitol, and that's not a good look for the Republican Party. So actually, with them not being up for reelection, they've done a favor to the Republican
you're saying
Party.
they did the dirty work.
They
They
did the
carried the
dirty
water
work.
for
They-
those that
for
were
those
afraid to step
who was
up.
afraid to open their mouth. So, and of course, Blanche had to concede as well. And I understand he got Trump approval. Otherwise, he never would have been. It never would have gotten out of committee.
But my argument is this: even with the written statement, is a written statement binding? Are they held to this by law? I mean, and how
Well,
do
he
you
could
enforce
easily
it?
reverse it. We know that.
Yeah.
Once he's nominated.
I think that's just
But,
for show, and
yeah.
American people should not be so gullible as to accept that.
Well, it's a bad look. It'll be if he reverses it after they agreed. It's still a bad look.
But it's a given. The time it is going to
Well,
happen.
I mean, he said he was good. It was Trump agreed that it needed to go away, and then a month later he said we need it.
Because this administration, yes, indeed, does it not have a credibility problem across the board?
As Minister Falcon said, he speaks the language. His language is liar. You know?
Yes, yes. And in the remaining 2 minutes or so that we do have, I want you to tell us what we should be aware of over the course of the next 30 days, and what is on your horizon that we need to pay particular attention to, state, local, or federal, as part of the
Well,
public arena.
the
Yes, sir.
state and local politics, we have
Yes.
to understand it in the context of Plan 2025. That plan dictates Republican control of Democratic cities. We've seen it in Jackson, Mississippi with the judicial system. And of course, this is what's going on with respect to New Orleans. The governor, the Liz Murrow, they've come out and said, New Orleans is out of control. Of course, they have the Supreme Court, they have the Republican legislature, they have the governor administration. So basically, what's happening is part of a long range plan for the mega wing to take over democratically controlled cities, and that means using the Duncan situation or using Jason Williams, who by law the grand jury is an independent entity. They can bring charges, but that's not the narrative they want. They want the narrative that says Jason Williams was responsible for, even though the grand jury can operate independently. So beware, they kind of speak the same language as the president, liar language.
Yes,
That's
sir.
it. Yeah.
Okay, that's outstanding. Again, I want to thank you for joining me. When you come, it's always a treat, and you always bring good and valuable information to Dr. Clark's Living Classroom. And again, I'd like to thank my listening audience and viewers for tuning in. And you can follow me on all platforms of social media. And as always, it's been a pleasure.